Performance WebTuna's summer webinar. I'm Barry Howlett. I'm responsible for customer success within the WebTuna team at Application Performance. The format today will consist of a brief introduction by me and then Mick McGuinness will provide a presentation and demo of the WebTuna to explain new features and changes. We also have Tony Pounder from ID Live who will take us through synthetic monitoring using WebTuna, and after this we'll return to Mick for a view of future changes that are in the pipeline, and then a question and answer session a little later from that. So first, some introductions. The webinars for WebTuna. Today is our, if you like, our summer 2016, and the weather's actually supporting that. And we have one planned for each quarter, September and then December. Main purpose is to provide all of you with updates on the changes and where the product's developing, and also to get your feedback so we can feed that back into our development team to look at changes. So in terms of the people on the call and within our team, today we've got Zoe Buckingham, who has organised this webinar, and she's kind of managing the event in the background. So if you can, please submit any questions online and Zoe will pick them up and ask them during the Q&A session towards the end. So in terms of the WebTuna leads that we've got within our company, there's myself, Barry Howlett. I'm leading the customer success for Application Performance WebTuna. A little bit more on that in the next couple of slides. Mick McGuinness, he leads our operations team and the technical support. David Mung, he's working right alongside me. We work both together on customer success and relationship. You'll be hearing a little bit more from him over the coming weeks. We've got Martin Pinner, who leads the development team and does technical support for problems and change. And then we've got Andy Moores, who leads our kind of user support. He does test and deployment. So, customer success, it's not a term that we're all familiar with, but what my role here and what we're trying to achieve is a good level of engagement with all of you. You're all users of WebTuna. What we're aiming to do is to help you individually get more from WebTuna, but overall to help your business get maximum benefit out of WebTuna. You've got the tool. The data's there. We just want to make the best of how you extract the right information out of that. How to get involved? I'm going to be in regular contact with all of you over the weeks and months ahead, but if there's anything that is causing you any concern, or just don't wait, you can either call me or submit a help request if needed, either through our support email or using the sort of chat features that you'll see on our websites. What we're actually doing in parallel with this is we're building a EMA community, so you can contact either the application performance team leads or any other WebTuna users. It's a new initiative we've put together, the EMA Community for WebTuna. It's at an embryonic stage, but it will benefit for all of you users, and I would like you all to try and take part in shaping this, so contribute where you can. You'll all receive an invite from me to join that during June. The last thing I just want to raise is, as part of, as you know, WebTuna's got a rich set of data which is available for you to access. You've all got specific areas of interest, whether it be performance issues, whether you're reporting on user uptake, all different areas. hopefully you can share some of those activities you're doing through the Yammer so that other users can pick up and see what the use is. However, a review of your data may reveal areas of particular interest to your business, and as part of our customer success scope, we are offering a brief review, and that's something that we'll do as a brief review free of charge, and I'll contact you individually to discuss how we're going to do that. If that reveals significant areas of interest or you have specific needs, we can carry out a more detailed review as part of our sort of performance review services. That's all from me. Don't forget you can post questions at any time on the webinar screen you've got there. I'm going to now hand you over to Mick McGuinness, who's going to take you through the new features. So over to you, Mick.
Great, thanks Barry. First of all, I'm going to have a look at the new features that we've delivered in the first half of this year, and I'm going to walk through those in a live environment so you can see those in a bit more detail, and then later I'm going to come back and talk about some of the roadmap features we've got coming up. So first of all, earlier in the year we added some new metrics into the performance view. So you may have seen these new columns show up in the user interface, and maybe you're using these already, or maybe you're just not sure what they actually mean. So I'm going to kind of talk through what these actually mean. So we've got across all the different views, you can see things like response start time, download time, AppDeck Score. So these are all new metrics that we're now including. So I'm going to walk through what that actually means. We've also, this was actually our #1 most requested feature, we've now got the option to select more than 500 records. If you've got a very long table of results there, we can go up to 10,000 records now. And if you need more than that, you can still get that through our API. So that was the first thing I'm going to show in a second. Earlier in the year again, we delivered an improvement to our access control. Not the most exciting of new features, but it was something that was becoming a problem, particularly for customers where they had a lot of domains that they were monitoring and a lot of users, and it just became difficult every time you added a new user then to allocate all the different domains to them, and every time you added a new domain having to go through all the existing users that you created to allocate that new domain to the users. So now we've got group-based access control, and I'll show you in a second how that works, and it should make your life easier, particularly if you're one of those customers with lots of domains. And then the most recent new feature, we were hoping this would be live for the webinar today. It's slipped, as software often does, but it should be available within the next week or so. And that is our new device detection capabilities. So you'll see when you look at the view menu, there are several new options that you can now choose from. And this one that we're showing here is the device detection view, so you can now detect, particularly for mobile devices, things like iPhones and iPads and Kindle Fires and so on. So I'm going to take you through that as well and what's new there. Some other minor changes. The first one here I already mentioned, which was increasing the maximum number of rows you can select from 500, so now you can go up to 10,000. That was a big one for a lot of customers, so if you're one of those, you'll be pleased to see that in the product. And that also applies to the CSV export as well. We've changed the length of the username field that you can collect. Previously it was truncated at 30 characters, now we've extended that to 60, which means that you can now see the full username. That's particularly useful if you're taking WebTuna data and joining it to other things, because obviously if it's truncated, you think can't make the join. So so that's now 60, which hopefully people don't have usernames longer than 60, but if you do, let us know. We've updated our GeoIP mapping database to the new and improved version of that. So you should see that the we're mapping IPs to countries and latitudes and longitudes. That should be more accurate now since we made that change. We've added more statistics. I'll show you this in a second. So around our details screen, we've now got more statistics around the histogram, so medians and percentile figures as well. And then the last thing which I've underlined here, because this is important for anybody that is still running WebTuna JavaScript version 1 or 2, those haven't been updated in several years now, and they will be disabled on the 31st of July. So you've got a couple of months to get yourself migrated to the latest version 3. Otherwise, you'll start to see degraded functionality. So, moving into a demo of the new features. So first of all, on the performance screen, I mentioned we've got these new columns now. So starting from the beginning, the number of elements is the number of things on the page. So you can see the average, and if you mouse over it, the min and the max. So that would be the number of, if you added up all the images, CSS files, JavaScript files, and any other resources within the web page. That's the figure that we're giving you here. And we've got this now across whatever view you have selected. So here we're viewing domains, and we can see the average number of elements for each of those. We've got response time, obviously, which we always had. You can now see that broken down into these next two columns here. So these two columns will add up to the total response time. So the total response time is everything up until the page load completes. And we break that down into the time to response start, which is from when the user clicks until the first byte of HTML content comes back. So if that figure is slow, like in the case of this one down the bottom here, it's taking 1.5 seconds almost for the response to even start coming back, then that would be an indicator that you've got a server-side performance problem. Whereas if that's pretty quick and you're getting your response start to come back within less than a second, or half a second in this case, but then it's this column which is large, then that would be a good indicator that it's actually the page contents that are the problem. So here, for example, response starts to come back in about half a second. It then takes a further 7.66 seconds to download the page contents. So that may be a problem with your page content, like maybe you've got too many large images or things like that that are bloating out the page. We've got requests from unique visitors, which are columns that we already had there. We've then got this new column called total response time. And that one's is a good one to kind of weight what the most important thing to look at is. So the total response time here, which is showing us as 49 minutes, this would be the total amount of time that all users had spent waiting for that particular thing. So in this case, 49 minutes. That was how long these 139 users took in total to make these 439 requests. So it's a good way of kind of getting the thing that you need to focus on based on the weighted importance of it. And then the last thing in the list is the AppDeck Score. And the AppDeck Score is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a score between 0 and 1, where 0 is very bad and 1 is excellent. And it's a measure of performance. It's actually an industry standard measure. You can read more about it on our blog. We have quite a detailed blog article on this. But basically, every request which WebTuna sees gets put into one of 3 categories. So the ones where the user was satisfied, the ones which were tolerating, and the ones which were frustrated. And then based on this very simple calculation on the count of each of those three buckets, you get this score between 0 and 1, and you can see what then would be unacceptable, poor, good, excellent, and so on based on the score. So we're color coding them based on that. So for example, you can see here 2 of them are flagged up as not being so good. So this one here, 0.53, means that most of our requests there were actually unacceptable. You can see there is some correlation with the average response time. So in this case, 8 seconds is the average response time. But if you look at this one, 0.53 if we click on the details for that, you can see that most of our requests were in the red here, so 5 seconds or longer. Whereas if you go back and look at this one here, this one's got 0.78 as a score. Look at the details on that one. We can see, well, a lot of people are getting good performance, so we've got a lot of green here, but then we've got this very long tail where people are getting response times up to about 48 seconds in this case. So it's a different kind of profile, and you can see that kind of gets reflected in this AppDeck score here. So moving on, the other thing before I move away from this screen that I wanted to show you here was this is where you can select the top 10,000, and as I said, that would be also applicable to the CSV if you were to export that as well. So moving on next, the next thing I wanted to show is access control. So you can see here how this has changed. So I'm just going to switch to a different screen where I can demonstrate this better. So the access control now, where you have a number of monitored domains here, what you can do is apply groupings to those. So in this case, I have 3 groups. I have a group called SharePoint, which has 3 domains, one called internal sites, which has got 2, and then one called public websites, which has just got a single domain in there. And if you have a look at the groups, so SharePoint, for example, it contains these 3 domains, but not this one. So once you've set up your groups then, when you want to apply access control to a user, you would go into the user screen, click on the user, and instead of having to grant access to individual domains as you would have done in the past, in this kind of way, you can still do that if you want to, but actually a more effective way of doing that is if you decide to leave that blank and instead grant access to a particular group. So if this user, for example, only needs access to the group called SharePoint, we can put them into that group, and then that is what they would see, is just those domains that we'd added to that group. If we then added another SharePoint domain, all we would have to do then is add it to the group, and all users would then inherit that if they've been assigned access to the group. The other way to assign access is at this top level, and you can just say grant everybody access to everything. So that would give them access to everything. And if we added any additional domains down here, if you've been granted access to all, then you would inherit that automatically. So this is much better, as I said earlier, for those customers that have got a lot of domains or a lot of users to administer. Certainly should make life a lot easier there. So moving back to my other environments, the next thing I wanted to show you is the device detection feature. As I said, this isn't quite released yet, but we're hoping it's not too far away. It should be a matter of days, certainly no more than a couple of weeks at the most. What this is now allows you to do, if we click into one of our domains here where we've got some data for this, you can see on the view menu now that we've actually got a lot of new things that you can drill down by. So whereas in the past we used to have just browser and operating system, you can see that browser and operating system now you've got brackets around there, and if you hover over it, it says this menu option is now deprecated. So we're going to leave that in the product for the time being, but eventually that will disappear. And what that's now being replaced by is some much improved functionality. So to show you what you can do here, so if we had to look by device family, which is one of the new menu options, we can see all the different device types. If you see other at the top, then that's something where you can't detect the device. It's a desktop machine. But in the case where it's not a desktop machine, we can see things like iPads and iPhones and Samsungs and Nexuses and HTC Ones, Lumias. So you should find this particularly useful for mobile devices, being able to tell what type of device, the model number that people are actually running. And you can drill down into these just like you could with any of the others. So if you wanted to click into iPad and have a look at what operating system they're running, for example. Okay, well, they're all running iOS, but which version of iOS? Okay, so we've got mostly on 9 point something, but we do have some users still on version 6, which is pretty old. If I just go back up again a few levels, remove my filters. If I was to view by browser family, again, one of the new menu options that we've got here. So we've got IE, Chrome, Firefox. These ones were already supported in the old version, but some of the new browsers that we're now detecting, things like Chrome Mobile, Samsung Internet Browser, Opera Mini, some of these ones I've never even heard of, Yandex Browser. So you should find that we're able to detect a lot more accurately the actual browser that's being used. And again, you can drill down into these. So for IE, as an example, you can see which versions of IE people are running. And in this case, most people are using IE 11, which is the latest, but we've also got 7, 8, and 9, and 10. But the interesting thing with IE is you also have something called the browser mode, because with IE, for example, you could be running IE 11, but you could be running it with a browser mode of compatibility mode, so it would be acting like an IE 7 browser. So when you actually look at, let's do that. If we click into IE 11, so we've got a filter now on Internet Explorer and version 11. If we go to browser mode, you can see that actually the majority of requests are coming through in IE 7 mode. So even though people are running 11, more than, I guess about 3/4 of the requests are coming through in IE 7 mode. So those are all the new menu options. So device family, browser version, operating system family, operating system version. And as I said, the old two are now being deprecated, but will stay in the product for the foreseeable future. So yeah, that I think covers what I wanted to show you in the product. So I'm just going to jump back over just to double check. Yeah, nothing else I wanted to show there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hand over to Tony Pounder. Tony's one of the co-founders of Intelligent Decisioning, who are one of our partners, and he's going to take you through synthetic monitoring. So,
okay, thanks, Nick.
Tony.
Thank you. Just show my screen. Thanks for that. So as WebTuna users, we all know that WebTuna has long since had real user monitoring at its core, and I'm pretty sure that everybody will understand what that is. So what I'm going to talk about is the introduction of a new form of monitoring capability within WebTuna, synthetic monitoring. WebTuna synthetic monitoring is carried out by a Windows application that can be configured to pull and execute pages from websites, including SharePoint and SharePoint Online websites, and to upload and download documents to those same sites. When the web pages are being retrieved, they are executed on the client machine, and the WebTuna monitoring script fires to record the hit within WebTuna. The document upload and download times are also logged in WebTuna. The WebTuna dashboard, as Nick's demonstrated, can then be used to gather the performance data in the usual way by slicing in on domain, URL, path, etc. So let's have a closer look at what we can do. So configuration of the application allows you to set a number of different URLs to execute tests on. It allows you to set the number of times to repeat those tests. It allows you to set the location of documents to be uploaded and downloaded, and again the number of times to execute each upload and download test. The actual monitoring can be run in one of two modes. An on-demand mode, where this is a one-off user given access to install the application, which they can then configure and run on demand to check performance of a given site. And a typical use case for this would be troubleshooting or pre-engagement performance testing. The second mode is the scheduled task mode. This is where the UI is hidden and the application is scheduled using something like Windows Scheduler to repeat the tests every X amount of minutes, every hour, every day, etc. This allows you to get a baseline performance from different locations. Use cases for this is pre-migration baselining, so you're understanding the performance of your platform before you actually migrate the content in there. It's very important to realize that all the synthetic transaction data is gathered and sent to WebTuna, and then it sits alongside your existing real user monitoring. So some pros and cons of real user monitoring and synthetic transaction monitoring. So synthetic transaction monitoring can be used to baseline and re-baseline a website after changes have been introduced. It can be used to test sites and services for availability by constantly polling those sites. And it can carry out testing in pre-production phase before production starts proper. So this gives you a chance to understand how that application is going to perform before you migrate your users. A couple of things that synthetic monitoring isn't so good for are, obviously, it doesn't measure real user monitoring and update transactions. Because these are repeated transactions, you wouldn't want to be updating, so you would be doing read-only type transactions. The pros of the real user monitoring: captures all the user activity and performance and gives you the real end user experience. The cons of that is there can be a lot of data and it may include hits that you're not interested in, although the WebTuna dashboard does a good job of allowing the data to be filtered and sliced and diced. It's difficult to alert on real user monitoring due to the amounts of hits, and it can only monitor sites that are experiencing real user traffic, which is fair enough because it's real user monitoring. So that's about synthetic monitoring, and I've now just got a small case study with a company called SAB Miller. SAB Miller are a large organisation with 70,000 users across 80 countries. Those countries include European countries, South American, African and Australia. They have a SharePoint 2010 platform which is deployed in a Northern European country, and it's used as a global application platform onto which they are consolidating and rationalising existing deployments in those countries, thereby reducing infrastructure license and headcount and ultimately cost. So there are obvious challenges when trying to provide European centralised services to Australia, latency due to distance, and Africa, where the performance of the infrastructure can be poor. And what we did was use the synthetic transaction monitoring capability of WebTuna to baseline the SharePoint platform and also test the performance of the pipe. We did this from countries around the world and ahead of any country's move to the new global application platform. So what that meant was we understood how those applications are going to perform before those countries went onto the live system. Once it had been proven that the platform and infrastructure was performant from a given location, sites were made live and WebTuna Real User Monitoring then took over, providing visibility into the actual performance and the quality of the service, rather than the anecdotal performance claims made by users as had happened in the past. So the WebTuna Real User Monitoring gave us a great view of what was actually going on. There was also a side challenge in that SAB Miller wanted to measure the engagement levels of the user base. So we developed a process that extracted WebTuna data via the WebTuna API and created a data warehouse on top of that, on top of which Power BI sits producing charts, reports and dashboards, etc. I think Nick's going to talk a little bit more about that when his slides are back. So the results of that, we managed to baseline the expected performance from each location around the world and allowed SAB Miller to set expectation before that site was in use. Australia had to maintain their own infrastructure due to the latency issues which were seen. Without synthetic monitoring, it may have been possible to have created sites and deployed applications centrally that could just not perform sufficiently for Australia, so there was a large saving there. SAB Miller now have visibility 24/7 for all users and all servers using a combination of real user monitoring and the synthetic monitoring. SAB Miller have real usage and performance evidence for decision making, including the engagement levels of their employees. And SAB Miller now have the ability to isolate performance problems affecting specific users or locations. They've really always had this ability to do this, but the use of WebTuna has made the task much simpler, quicker and more efficient. So I've just got a small short demo here of synthetic monitoring. So we'll just have a quick look in WebTuna dashboard. There's currently no transactions. I'll just refresh that page. Okay, now we'll switch to the transaction. So it's a Windows application, as I said, just started by double-clicking as normal. Got the option to set some credentials, which I've already set. Credentials are preserved between runs, but they're stored in a secure place within the Windows isolated storage, so they're not crackable. And to launch this, what I've done is I've configured this transaction generator to hit an ID SharePoint Online Office 365 tenant. It's going to call a page 3 times. Once it's done that, it's going to then upload 3 documents into a SharePoint Online document library, and it's going to then download those, and it's going to monitor the performance. So if I click Go, you can see that it's executing the page. And what it's actually doing is it's actually executing the page so that the WebTuna monitoring scripts are being fired, and WebTuna is actually seeing these transactions. So we'll just wait a moment or two while it's now uploading the documents. So it's uploading a 300k, a 500k and a 1 meg document, just to give a range of performance. It's also now downloading those 300, 500 and 1 meg documents, and it's completed. So now we'll just go into WebTuna again. And there's the requests that were made. If I just click through here, we can actually see that there were 2 requests for the default page. 1 upload of the 1 meg document, 1 upload of the 500k, 1 download of the 1 meg, 1 upload of the 300k, 1 download of the 500k, and 1 download of the 300k. And we can see those stats, average response times, the elements that were in the page, the number of requests. So typically we're back into the normal WebTuna dashboard. Okay, and I think that concludes my piece. So I'll hand back over to Mick.
Are you there, Mick?
Sorry, I was talking on mute there. Thanks, Barry. So yes, thanks, Tony. And yeah, I just wanted to finish off on roadmap before we go into Q&A. So these are some of the things that we're working on at the moment and up and coming. We've got, as with any roadmap statement, you know, the kind of disclaimer at the bottom there to say, you know, we're not guaranteeing any of these will be delivered in a certain time scale, but they are things that, you know, we're looking at working on at the moment. If anybody's got any kind of feedback on any of this, then, you know, get in touch with Barry. We'd love to kind of hear your comments on this. And we do actually have a couple of polls coming up as well, where we just wanted to kind of gauge from the audience what people are most interested in seeing. So the top of the list here is talking about BI reporting, so getting data from WebTuna into the business intelligence tools that you would normally use in your organization. So the first one that we've picked out is Power BI from Microsoft, and we're actually in the process of building a content pack for Power BI. So we have the agreements in place with Microsoft, and we're working with them to deliver that. So I can show you actually a kind of proof of concept. This is not, you know, the end result by any means, but just as an example for anybody that's interested, this is WebTuna data in Power BI, and then obviously once you've got that into the web interface, you can then apply filters to that. So for example, this is all live data, so if you clicked onto a particular domain, you can see the map, refreshes, and all the charts underneath here. As if you filter on a different host over here, you can see it zooms in because these are the active regions within the world that are accessing this particular site. And you can see the response time with that one was pretty bad. I zoom back out and it kind of, everything live updates as you click into it. So if you're familiar with Power BI, you'll have already seen this kind of behavior, but we're looking to build a content pack so to make it easier where you can just apply the content pack and then get this type of functionality. So I think that's probably a good point to just get Zoe to bring up one of our polls. What we wanted to ask was a question about which, if you are interested in getting WebTuna data into BI tools, and if so, which of the BI tools here would be of interest for you. If the one that you're using isn't on the list, because there is a limit to the number of answers we can have in a GoToWebinar poll. If it's one of the other ones, just tick the other box and then let us know in the chat window which one it is that you're using. So we'll just give it 10 seconds for the last submissions to come in, and then I'll let Zoe display the results for that one.
Right, Mick, I don't know if you can hear me, but while they're doing that, the BI that you showed, that's just a prototype that you put together for now?
That's right, yeah, that's a prototype, but the development on the content pack is kind of in progress as well, but I don't have anything to show there just yet. Okay,
but that's obviously on the roadmap and making some progress.
Yes.
That's good.
So looking at the results, I can see a third of the audience are interested in Power BI, so that's good. We've also got a third that are interested in Tableau, which I guess it probably would naturally be the next one to look at. Tableau, market leaders, I guess, in the BI space, and then other. So we'll probably need to look for the feedback there from which other tools people are using and see. So yeah, if it's not one that's we actually deliver a kind of out-of-the-box integration for, there are always getting data into these kind of products just using our RESTful API. So if you haven't already seen that, have a look at the documentation on the RESTful API. Most BI tools these days will allow you to get data from an API directly into the product. So yeah. Okay, so thank you for those answers. Next thing on the roadmap is that we're looking to add is a new dashboard. Again, this is work that's already in progress. We're looking to build a kind of top-level dashboard that looks across everything and has lots of different widgets, and it gives you that kind of top-level view of things. And kind of in parallel with that is the next feature here, which is the filtering and saving of filters. So at the moment, you've probably seen in the product, you're clicking into something, and that will apply a filter on that one particular thing. So you can drill down on the browser type or version or the path or the domain, but you're always drilling down on one thing at a time. And one thing that we're looking to do is to add more complex filtering. So for example, you could have a filter which was Internet Explorer version 10 or 11. So that's a combined filter across two things, and then to basically save that as a filter. So you could save that as supported browsers, and then that would be a filter that you could just pick from a pick list and apply that to any data that you see in the product. So,
again, it's Barry. If I can just interrupt there, Mick, this is something that's already been prototyped, and this is configurable, is it, for users, so you can actually configure your own dashboard and filtering and save it?
That's right, yeah. So we already have a working prototype of this. We just need to integrate it into the product. But yeah, saving of filters will be per user. So you'll save your filters, and then they'll be available in a pick list the next time you go in. so you can apply the same filters over again.
Okay, save some time then. Yep, good.
Yeah. Fourth on the list is alerting, something that's been requested for a long time and is actually quite difficult to do based on real user monitoring data, just because there can be a lot of things that can cause outliers, which may trigger alerts that you didn't really want. It could be, the example I always give is, user on a mobile phone on a train goes through a tunnel. The response time is obviously really bad, but it's not necessarily something you wanted to be alerted about. So, we have some thoughts about how we can do alerting, and obviously alerting based on synthetics, like Tony just showed, is obviously a lot easier than alerting based on real user data. So we're looking at actually alerting on both, but that's kind of just in the research phase at the moment. But if anybody's got any thoughts on alerting, we'd love to hear that. And then the last one on my list was email digests, which other products have this kind of feature, and we kind of have some emails that you can receive out of WebTuna, and they're kind of daily or monthly, and you may already be using those, but we're just looking to improve on that. This idea came from, so within our company we all use fitness trackers. It was something that we introduced around Christmas, where everybody has a fitness tracker, and it's kind of competitive to see who has the highest step count and things like that. And what they do is they give you a weekly digest of all your activity for the week. What was your best day? What was your worst day? What was your average heart rate? And so on. And so the idea was to do something similar for WebTuna. And I guess what we're thinking of is probably a weekly email, where it's just a digest of all the activity that happened in WebTuna over the last week, and just to flag up some of the key things which you might have missed if you hadn't actually been going into the product on a daily basis to have a look. It's just to kind of build that into a daily digest. So we had a question around that, because as I said, our existing emails are either daily or monthly. My suspicion is daily is probably too frequent, and monthly is probably not frequent enough, and probably weekly is I'm thinking is where most people will go. But Zoe, if you want to bring up the poll, we can actually see what people think around that. We just give it another 10 seconds for the last submissions to come through, and then Zoe, if you want to show the results. Okay, so yeah, that was fairly unanimous, 100%. I think weekly is the right frequency, which was what I suspected as well. So, okay, excellent. So that was what we had. If anybody's got any other ideas for the product, obviously we're always looking to hear feedback from customers, and obviously we've got our EMA Community, which we're starting as well. So I'll hand back over to Barry and Zoe, who can take us through the questions and answers.
Right, thank you, Mick. Thank you. Thanks both to Mick and Tony for taking us through all those features, the new features, the demo, the synthetics, and the roadmap. We've now got a bit of time for a question and answer session with the team here and with everyone who's with us on the call. I'm sure that Zoe has picked up some questions during the chat, and please post any more now if you can. So I'm going to kind of ask Zoe to try and help deliver some questions, and we'll answer them best we can. Zoe, have we?
Hello everyone. Yes, we have. Somebody's asked, this is I think a question from Mick, regarding the new columns in WebTuna, what's the total representative time?
Okay, so I think that's referring to the total response time, which was one of the new columns we added. So total response time is the total amount of time that users have spent waiting So that would actually be, if you was to look at like the number of requests and multiply it by the average response time, that would add up to the total response time. And so it's just a good way of weighting the importance of things. So it may be the total, it may be that you've got something that's not requested that many times but has a very long response time, in which case it would be at the top of the list. Or it could be something that's actually quite quick already but has a massive number of requests. So again, that would mean that it's still something quite important because a lot of people are accessing it, and maybe it's still something that you want to look at optimizing.
Yeah, I guess there's two aspects to that, Mick. Is one is the kind of technical performance, where should we spend our time and effort to decide where to make the best improvements, but I guess the other angle is that it kind of represents to some extent the amount of lost time that users have had to wait for responses, and you could actually relate it to a number of hours or dollars or pounds that perhaps staff are sitting waiting when they could be doing useful work. So there's kind of two kind of aspects to that, maybe. I hope that.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, thank you. Yes, hopefully it's helped the person who asked. And we've had a question here. I think this is for Tony. Tony, you said that synthetic monitoring was installed with a big global company. How many locations was it installed in, and how long did it take in these locations?
Okay, so how many countries was it deployed in? It was deployed in 5
Yes.
countries. Yeah, it was deployed across 5 countries. It was sent as a simple MSI installer. The installation process takes moments, less than a minute, and we picked 3 or 4 times during the working day to actually schedule the transaction tool to try and get a feel for performance of the application across the day.
Right, Tony, it's Barry. Just a supplement to that. So when it's installed, is it actually locally managed, or can you remotely access it and manage the tool?
No, it's locally installed. Locally to the country that was using it to monitor their performance. So it went to Colombia, and they installed the application and ran it on the Colombian desktops, because that's the kind of target environment. So it's always run from the local environment.
Okay, so there's local buy-in there, so that's quite positive as well, isn't it? Okay, yes. Understand.
Okay. I understand that Tony's coming over quite quietly, so I'll just summarise what he said. He said that installation was very quick and that it was also held locally. So that's how it was actually managed, just for anyone who couldn't hear that. And another question for Mick. The new device detection is a great feature, but what about historical data?
So yeah, historical data won't be affected by this. It'll just be for any new data. So from when we release the feature, hopefully within the next week, any new data will have the new device detection data available. We can't retrospectively apply it to the old data, unfortunately, because we didn't actually store the full user agent for every single request. Because what we're doing is the way it's working is we're taking the user agent and we're parsing the user agent to get the device out of there. So yeah, it will just be for new data.
So any historical data would just sit in kind of another bucket, will it, Mick? So
it will.
It won't disappear. Right, yeah. It'll be on the list, but in an unidentified category.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. And we have another question for Mick as well. What's the difference between analytics and performance as you would see them in WebTuna?
Analytics and performance. So I guess with WebTuna we've always tried to do both analytics and performance. So we do performance analytics and usage analytics. So yeah, obviously performance analytics is all about understanding response time and how that varies across users and countries and locations and browsers. But also, we're from a usage analytics point of view, we're understanding who's using what and from where, which can give you different insights. What are your most popular pages, which countries are most active, which is good for tracking things like user adoption. So if it's an internal application, then user adoption is one of the key measures of success. So we can actually see, how things are being used as well as the performance. And obviously the two things can be related. If you've got poor performance, then that's quite often will affect usage. So the two things are definitely go hand in hand.
Mick, is there a description in one of the blogs on the website to support that, or is that a different?
We do have a blog, that it kind of compares WebTuna with what you get from, I guess, a web analytics product like Google Analytics or similar. Okay. There is some overlap. Obviously, there's some advantages that WebTuna would have, and they are, I think that there is a blog article on that we published maybe a month or so back. Okay, thanks.
Fantastic. And just one final question, which is for Barry. Where can I find contact details for the team?
Right, because I talked about give me a call. Yes, so I don't think only one central place, but what I'll do is when we put out the links for the recordings for this webinar, I shall put the support email and some contact phone numbers on there, so you can all call me up if you wish and send some emails. I'll do that, Terry. Thank you. Any more questions, Zoe?
Well, that was the final question, so it's over to you now, Barry.
Okay, all right. As I say again, thank you all for your presentations. Thank you for your answers, Mick and Tony, with that. That concludes today's webinar. I hope you all found it helpful. This has been recorded, and we'll send out a link in the next few days so you can give it to your colleagues or listen through it again. You'll get invites for when we're holding in September. Thank you all for attending. We look forward to speaking with you all soon. Thank you very much.